Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kathy Robb, principal of Robb Water Partners, and it is my honor to serve as the chair of the board of the Waterfront Alliance. On behalf of the board and the staff, welcome to the 2025 Water. My professional life, advancing water-driven law, policy, finance, and sustainability across the country, in the San Gabriel Valley on the Pacific, on the Kalamazoo and Colorado rivers, in the Gulf of Mexico, and of course here in the New York region and down the East Coast on the Atlantic. Currently, I'm focusing on the country's southern boundary water, the Rio Grande River, with the International Boundary and Water Commission, negotiating treaty provisions water quality, scarcity, and delivery to promote sustainability and resilience between our two countries with their several shared waters. So what does this have to do with our conference, you may ask? All these water bodies across the country and internationally require actions to address specific challenges, but they are united by a need for resilience and sustainable protection to build for the future. And that is what the Waterfront Alliance does. We are living in a dynamic time. Deep changes are coming fast at us and our sectors from the new administration in Washington, unprecedented changes, and we must meet them in the moment. Some things we will do by necessity differently, but so much must remain the same. This is why we chose commitment as this year's conference theme. How important it is now more than ever before, that we commit to our principles and support one another as we work to expand resilience efforts at the water's edge. The Waterfront Alliance offers a big tent, and with your help, the Waterfront Alliance has the people, tools, and drive to meet this moment. Our dedicated and highly knowledgeable staff creatively advance our work every day. And it is convenings such as these that create sparks that grow through the year, illuminating new ideas and kindling relationships and partnerships that make a difference. From passing legislation that fosters sustainability and resilience, to verifying new waterfront edge design guidelines, WEDGE sites, and certifying over 1,000 WEDGE associates, to connecting with a record number of residents and students on climate preparedness, education, and literacy, to supporting sound decisions based on science, and by insisting that communities are given access to the waterfront. The Waterfront Alliance collaborates with our partners, you, to implement better water outcomes. Probably, like most of you, I love the water. Right now, the world has its eye on water. Water in adequate quantity and quality is the key environmental challenge of our time. Together, through the Waterfront Alliance and your leadership, we have made so much progress that I am proud to be a part of. But we and many other talented, dedicated people long ago solved the easy water challenges. The water challenges that remain and are to come for all of us are mind-numbingly complex and will require us together to do hard things. So it is great that today we convene to explore our commitment and determine how we might best do those hard things and move the water needle together toward the positive. Perhaps no one person has a larger impact on the waterfront in this region than the one who serves as the mayor of New York City. The Waterfront Alliance, with 17 partners, are hosting a virtual mayoral forum tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. You can register with the QR code on the screen, if there were one. We'll find you a QR code to register. Our co-hosts represent waterfront communities across the city, and we are asking the mayoral candidates to respond with their plans for the challenges facing our waterfronts. Please join us. Among the most important attendees here today are 100 students. Tomorrow's leaders, yes. Tomorrow's leaders in the maritime industry and environmental sectors. They have been selected through an application process to qualify for a scholarship to attend the conference and hail from nearly 40 public and private institutions. I'd like to ask them to stand and be recognized. Thanks for coming. I hope you'll take the opportunity to meet them and learn more about what this rising generation is pursuing. You'll see that they're wearing orange Waterfront Scholar ribbons that you cannot miss, so we can spot them and introduce ourselves. The remarkable board of directors of the Waterfront Alliance, all nationally recognized leaders across many water-related fields, make so much possible. Their insights have been invaluable in dealing with the new challenges we are facing from this new administration. And when we learned just 2 months ago that our former president and CEO was moving on, this board stepped up further and has given enormous amounts of time and thought to effectuate a very successful transition. We now are conducting a national search for our next president. I'd like to ask our board to stand and be recognized. Please seek us out to talk about water and the Waterfront Alliance. This conference, and all of you are here today, reflect what the Waterfront Alliance, through our staff and board, stands for. People who make our lives, our region, and its economic opportunities, sustainability, and resilience possible. Thank you for being here. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Joseph Sutkowi, Waterfront Alliance's Chief Water Design Officer, to tell us more about our day. Joseph?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. It's so exciting to see this record-breaking crowd at the Waterfront Conference. We're thrilled that you're all here. I want to express gratitude for the work that you have chosen in your lives, as your profession, as a volunteer, or as a citizen, to lead a better future, a more resilient future, and a future that can give us hope and a sense of possibility as we face climate change, one of the greatest challenges that humanity has faced. Our partners and sponsors in this challenge with us, and all of you, and we want to thank you for making today's event possible. So of those sponsors and partners, I first want to thank New York Cruise Lines. He provided the boat that we celebrated on last night, cruising around the harbor and out to Coney Island and Staten Island. We presented our second set of Dr. Edward Williams Waterfront Champion Awards this year to the exceptional community leaders and organizations Kayak Staten Island, Southeast Queens Residents Environmental Justice Coalition, yes, and Karen Heil, a science teacher at PS 175 on City Island. Our Commodore sponsors, Red Hook Terminals, Battery Park City Authority, and Rise Light and Power are due extraordinary gratitude as sponsors, but also for what each of them is doing to combat and address climate change. To our captain level sponsors, which includes Dewberry, AECOM, EDC, NYSERDA, Stantec, and Rob Water Partners, thank you, and thank you for all that you do. Check out all of the sponsors and the materials they've supplied in the digital tote bag, which you'll have a chance to connect with them throughout the day. And it has been a great pleasure to establish over the last year, a little more than a year, the Waterfront Alliance Corporate Council, which has been a partnership between board members and staff to convene this group. It's a body of companies at the forefront of business responsibility, confronting the transformation of coastlines and waterfronts with a focus on climate resilience and sustainability. I want to thank and recognize HNTB, AECOM, Community Offshore Wind, Vineyard Offshore, Hornblower Group, Con Edison, Dewberry, KPF, Red Hook Terminals, and Scape Landscape Architecture for their dedication and commitments to sustainability and climate resilience. So far this year, we have brought together city and state agencies, as well as elected officials, to understand some of the obstacles to getting work done in the New York and New Jersey harbor, as well as to provide feedback to cities' planning processes. Look, we look forward to working with all of you in the coming years and hope to see many more of your companies join us for these exclusive events. So as we have in the past few years, I want to reinforce that this conference takes sustainability seriously. We're happy to partner this year with Stantec, Hudson River Foundation, and Con Edison in our efforts to make this a green meeting. Your efforts are welcome as well. We hope that many of you brought your own thermoses and straws for your beverages today. That goes a long way in reducing waste. We have minimized paper. Please find that the program and everything you need to know on the conference app or mobile site. Signs and other materials are printed on recyclable paper or reused from last year. And we aren't using plastic badge holders. You can turn in your badge and lanyards at the end of the day, and we'll reuse or recycle them. Catering today is fully vegetarian. You won't find individual plastic water or juice bottles anywhere. At the closing reception this afternoon, straws and napkins are going to be given only on request. We want to make a request of all of your partner organizations, businesses, and nonprofits that are here today to make a commitment, as we have, to sustainable events. The extra costs we've found to be relatively affordable, and if more of us commit, those costs will go down. And then with few people traveling here via plane today, albeit we have one transcontinental flight for our Morgan lecture speaker this afternoon, the carbon footprint of this event is overall very, very small. But to ensure that we cover our activities today, we've made a donation to Seagrass Grow, which is a program of the Ocean Foundation, to put back what we've taken out through travel, energy use, and materials on site. CEUs, I'm almost done with the housekeeping. CEUs from AIA and ASLA are available for all sessions, and engineering PDHs for the technical track sessions are available as well. You'll have QRs to scan in each session to record your participation, and you'll get an option to submit your details after the conference as well. Okay, that's enough business. Let's get a new face up here. I would like to introduce Raju Mann, the President and CEO of Battery Park City Authority, to tell you a little bit about what's going on at this place where we're spending our day.
It's a coincidence. I didn't plan that. I need to get some more ties, I guess I've learned today. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all. Welcome to Battery Park City. I thought I'd give a little bit of context about where we are today and then talk a little bit about the work we're doing. So as most of you know, probably, Battery Park City was a state authority created in 1968. So we spent the better part of the first 40 years developing this place just west of the West Side Highway, really as an extension of Lower Manhattan, really to serve Lower Manhattan and to improve its health and economic vitality. That mission was largely complete in the early part of this century with the build out of our last buildings and the completion of our parks. So we were in a maintenance role, really maintaining the place and the neighborhood, doing lots of great cultural programming, and then Sandy hit. And the city of New York, as you all know, really took the lead in developing what I think is still a pretty far-sighted planning framework for the future of coastal protection in Lower Manhattan and the city as a whole. And we really saw ourselves as the project delivery partner in our neck of the woods for that project. We still own all of the land today. We still own all the 92 acres. So it's a bit of a unique jurisdictional relationship we have here. And we got to work with the leadership of many of my colleagues here. I think Gwen is here, Angela's here, Kimberly's here, Claudia's here. We got to work with many of our partners in the private sector, developing a strategy for Battery Park City that plugged into the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Framework. So if there were a window there, you might see the first phase of our project. If you go upstairs and you're in the conference room upstairs, you can see the first phase of the Wagner Park redevelopment, which is really about elevating the park, making it flood resilient, and protecting the neighborhoods just to the east. So I encourage you to go up there. Claudia is giving a talk at lunch about the details of that project, and it's pretty fascinating how it's evolved and changed. And we're thrilled to be opening the park later this summer. So really a kind of key milestone, I think, in the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency work. And just to the north, we are now undertaking a much more ambitious 1.4-mile stretch of coastal protection project with a progressive design build team led by Turner E. Cruz and with Arcadis as the lead designer on the project. I think probably some of those folks are here today. We are hoping to complete design and start construction by end of year. And then we have 5 years of construction ahead of us. So over the course of those two projects, we will have protected approximately 2 miles of Lower Manhattan's coastline since Sandy. I think a pretty incredible accomplishment for a relatively small organization, but really with the teamwork of the city of New York as our key partner. So I would encourage you, when you spend time upstairs, to really take a look at the elevation changes that we've created in the pavilion building. That's going to be a real jewel, I think, for resiliency in the city. And we look forward to welcoming you back when the park is open, and we've got some great programming ahead. But not just to sort of talk about our work to date, but to raise some questions here that I think really have come out of a lot of the work that maybe will help shape the conversations to come later today and in the subsequent months and years. I think there's a few themes that have come up across the work that I think are probably true across a lot of these projects, but certainly we're living and breathing today as challenges to this work moving forward. You know, the first is how do we rethink? This strikes me as a crowd that's probably read The Abundance, Ezra Klein book. I imagine there's a book club of abundance at the Waterfront Alliance somewhere. But I think one of the fundamental questions we have to grapple with in the coming years and decades is how do we rethink our regulatory framework to deliver these climate projects? I can tell you I don't think we can do it with our current regulatory framework at the scale that we need to do. And so I think that's going to be an important question for us as a community, is what can we do to update it to really make sure that we are protecting the environment, obviously, number one, but also delivering these projects in a timely way the city really needs. So I think that hopefully will be an ongoing conversation today and in the coming months and years. I think the second question is how do we increase the public sector's capacity to be a partner to deliver this work? That is still an evolving topic of conversation, both at the state and the city level, and certainly distressingly at the federal level. But I think that is a central question that we need to grapple with more solidly and clearly. Who is leading, and how do we increase the capacity of the agencies responsible for this work and support them in delivery of the work? And I think the third question I would just ask you to all think about together, which is really how do we build a political an advocacy arm around climate adaptation, which I know is a topic of conversation today and probably every day for many of the folks in this room. And so I'm speaking to the choir here a little bit. But I do think that we need to sharpen our advocacy over the coming years and decades if we have an ability, a real desire to deliver on the scale of projects we need to deliver on to protect New York City and New York State. So I think those are 3 questions that really keep me up quite a bit at night in terms of thinking about the future. But I do think we have some incredible lessons to learn from some of these projects we are successfully completing. And so Claudia will talk more about that at lunch. And I want to thank just the Waterfront Alliance for pulling us all together and for being a central convening for these kinds of conversations that I think prior to the Alliance didn't really exist. So thanks to the board and the staff for all their hard work to pull us together and have these critical conversations. And I look forward to welcoming you back to Battery Park City this summer. So thank you.
Wait, this guy's already been up here. So one of the things that I think is a real strength of Waterfront Alliance is our ability to put smart people in a room to solve challenges together on our waterfront, and that's what we're really here for today. We as an organization exist to protect and revitalize everything we love along the waterfront and beyond, to energize others to do the same. Because without our collaborative and persistent efforts, essential change will be slow, fragmented, or worse, non-existent. Our collective work is made more difficult by the actions of the Trump administration. You know, whatever your individual politics, I think we can all agree that there is an increased risk now facing our coastal communities and challenges to the livelihoods and to the missions of people in this room. This conference and Waterfront Alliance are not shying away from this fact. We recognize that the challenge, and and our programs are responding to it. At today's conference, we want to address this really front and center. Our first guests in our opening panel of speakers are really key leaders in federal government and federal policy, or have been. We are eager to hear from them as they share more on their perspective on the world that we're in now, and frankly, the chaos that's ensuing. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, friend of Waterfront Alliance, Congresswoman Grace Meng. Congresswoman Meng is in her seventh term in the U.S. House of Representatives, where she represents New York's 6th District in Queens. She serves on the House Appropriations Committee, where she is the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, Science, and related agencies. She has passed laws that protect public housing residents from insufficient heat and made Queens historic sites part of the National Park Service. The Congresswoman also made the appropriation that funds Waterfront Alliance's work in Flushing Meadows Corona Park. We're delighted to have her join us today live from Washington, D.C. And is she going to pop up on the screen? Good morning. Congresswoman, how are you? We're delighted to have you. I'll give you the floor, but I want to say thank you on behalf of the Waterfront Alliance team for being here today.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with all of you in person, but glad to join you virtually at least. Hi everyone, I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng, and it's such a privilege to be here with all of you today. I really want to thank the Waterfront Alliance team, including Chris and Kathy and John, to our speakers, Jainey and Walter, and of course, high praise as usual to our students who are here in the room today. So glad you could be with everyone. And thanks to everyone in this audience for taking the time to be here, to engage in this critical conversation, and just with all the work, for all the work that you have all been doing. It's such an honor to stand with those of you who literally are on the front lines of this fight to protect our agencies, programs, and people dedicated to building a cleaner, more sustainable future for all of us. As the highest ranking Democrat on the CJS committee that was mentioned earlier, this is the subcommittee that funds vital agencies like NOAA. And I'm deeply alarmed by this Trump administration's ongoing attacks on research, science, and our environment. Every day, as you know, NOAA provides forecasts that saves lives and protects our communities. It supports industries that are vital to our economy, from sustainable fisheries to renewable energy. It's NOAA that helps protect endangered marine species, monitor coral reefs, and develop policies to ensure healthy oceans and coastlines. It's NOAA's climate models that inform our understanding of global warming's impacts, from rising sea levels to changing weather patterns. But all of this work, this essential life-saving work, requires funding. And right now, NOAA's budget is literally at risk. As we push for policies that address climate change, conserve biodiversity, and promote sustainability, we can't which work to protect vulnerable communities from environmental hazards, address historical injustices, and advance policies that promote equity in environmental protection. In response, I join my colleagues in sending a letter to EPA Administrator Zeldin, urging him to please reverse the decision to eliminate these vital offices. We can't afford to ignore the needs of marginalized communities that have borne the brunt of environmental degradation for so long. Environmental justice must be at the heart of every decision that we make. Back home in Queens, I fought and will continue to fight for federal funding that strengthens our climate resilience. I'm so proud of the progress that we've all made together, but there's still so much more to do. In 2022, as was mentioned, I secured over $500,000 in federal money for the Waterfront Alliance's Climate Resilience Project in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park. This project is pivotal in developing community-based resiliency solutions to address the impacts of climate change right here in our own neighborhoods. And it's just the beginning. I will continue to fight for the necessary resources to support climate resilience, environmental protection, and sustainable development. Thank you all once again for the opportunity to be with you today. Your work and dedication are inspiring, and I look forward to continuing to working alongside with you. Together, we will make sure the future is one where science, equity, and environmental justice are prioritized. Have a great conference.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to invite our three panelists up to the stage, Jainey Bavishi, Walter Mugdan, and Sam Salustro. So we'll continue the conversation on federal impacts now, and I've got three, really esteemed and incredibly wise people on the stage with us. So we have Jainey Bavishi, former Deputy Administrator of NOAA. We have Walter Mugdan, the former Deputy Regional Administrator of EPA Region 2. And then Sam Salustro, the Senior Vice President of Market and Policy Strategy for Oceanic, which some folks in the room may know as the Business Network for Offshore Wind. You can see their detailed bios in the program, and rather than go through those at length, I really want to just jump into the questions. So, Jainey, let's start with you, and what's happening at NOAA today. So, can you talk a little bit about the cuts and the concrete changes that have happened to date, and really what is the impact of those going forward?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. And I see a lot of people in the back. I just wanted to mention there's some seats up front in case anyone wants to come up and get more comfortable. So in just the first few months of the Trump administration, we've seen over 2,000 staff leave the agency. NOAA is an agency of 12,000 people, or was an agency of 12,000 people, and it's already lost over 2,000. And normal operations have really been choked by red tape. Basic purchases, basic contracts require approvals from the highest levels, including the Secretary of Commerce. And as Representative Meng said, critical programs are targeted for either defunding or massive reductions. And so those programs include coastal resilience programs, programs focused on ocean and climate research. And we're already seeing the fallout from this, right? NOAA, the National Weather Service, I should say, is housed at NOAA, and we're already seeing fewer weather balloon launches, which are absolutely critical for accurate weather forecasts. We're seeing the closure of weather forecast offices overnight because somehow weather doesn't happen between midnight and 7 a.m., right? This is gonna leave gaps in local coverage during extreme weather events. So, this is not efficiency. This is threatening the services and the science that our coastal communities rely on.
And then, Walter, what's the story at EPA? Both agencies have received a lot of press about the cuts. For EPA, there's been a lot of talk about the environmental justice offices. Tell us what you've seen.
So what do I have, about 5 hours?
There's a countdown clock there. We're watching.
So EPA Administrator Zeldin boasted at a cabinet meeting in February that he was going to give a 65% cut to EPA. Wasn't clear whether or not that included the $20 billion under the Inflation Reduction Act renewable energy grants, which he has called a criminal grant program. If that was where he was going to take the cuts, then he could have done it without any staffing cuts, but that isn't the situation. So the president's budget came out on May 2nd. That would cut EPA funding by 54% and reduce personnel levels back to around 1980-81 period of time. That was, of course, before the brownfields laws, before the Superfund really got going, before RCRA program, the EPCRA program, before the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments, which created Title V permitting and hazardous air pollutant regulations, acid rain program. It was before the 2016 TSCA amendments, which was a huge, ambitious program. So it really would just undercut the ability to do a lot of this work. Then last Friday, there was, or I guess it was on May 2nd, yeah, was that maybe a week ago Friday, some more detailed proposals came out. We had already heard through a leak that the entire Office of Research and Development at EPA was going to be eliminated. That's really the largest single organization at EPA, has about 1,400 people, and about 1,100 or 1,200 of those were going to get eliminated. This is the premier environmental and pollution research organization in the world, really, but certainly in the country, was going to be eliminated. A few of those scientists would be brought over into other organizations, primarily to do things like accelerate the approval of pesticide approvals and things of that sort. And the AIR program was going to eliminate all of the climate research work, all of the climate regulatory work. That's been going back and forth since the Obama administration. None of those regulations had actually ever yet taken actual effect, but whatever was there was going to be eliminated, and the entire office and structure that was going to work on that was going to be eliminated. Importantly, the administrator and the president have said they're going to work to drop greenhouse gases from the list of regulated pollutants under the Clean Air Act. That's the key way they're going to do this is to reconsider the 2009 scientific finding that underpins all Clean Air Act climate regulations, namely that greenhouse gases are a serious pollutant. They're going to repeal Biden-era rules for power plant carbon and mercury reductions. They're not going to replace them. They're just going to get rid of them. There's going to be an elimination of the pollution prevention and sustainability programs. The expectation is that there might be a reorganization of the enforcement program, but that hasn't happened yet. And of course, as the Congresswoman said, there's going to be a complete elimination, has already been a complete elimination of all environmental justice work. Any single human being in the organization who was working primarily on environmental justice was put on administrative leave back in late January, early February. They've been sitting around getting paid, doing absolutely nothing since that time, waiting to get their RIF notices. RIF is bureaucratese for reduction in force. That means getting pink slips. By the way, RIFs are very cumbersome and time-consuming under the way that the government requires them to be done, so we'll see how much of that actually occurs. And then the final thing is that the administrator, Zeldin, about a month and a half ago or so, listed some 35 regulations for rollbacks. He called this, when he had made this announcement, the, quote, most consequential day of deregulation in American history, and saying, quote, we are driving a dagger through the heart of climate change religion and ushering in America's golden age. That was in an essay that he wrote for the Wall Street Journal. He said, our actions will also reignite American manufacturing, spreading economic benefits to communities. So, 35 regs that he said he was going to get rid of. We talked already about the finding that greenhouse gases are a serious concern. He's going to rewrite all sorts of air pollution rules or eliminate them, car and truck emission standards, get rid of the California waiver that allows California to set more rigorous standards than the national standards, and about 20 or so states tie into that, including New York and New Jersey. going to try to target rules involving industrial mercury and other air toxics pollutions. Federal wetlands regulations are going to get changed, the whole 404 program. And of course, you got POTUS, SCOTUS, WOTUS. You've got the endless pendulum going back and forth on the WOTUS, the Waters of the United States rules. Those are key to everybody here in this room. And again, back on March 12th, EPA and the Corps of Engineers announced a memorandum of issuing guidance to field staff on implementing a continuous surface connection rule. They call that consistent with the Sackett decision in the Supreme Court from 2023. And there is a Federal Register notice out there publicizing a series of 6 listening sessions and a 30-day recommendations docket to get feedback on key aspects of the definition of WOTUS. So that's a little short summary of what's going on at EPA.
Right. So Sam, to give you an opportunity to pile onto this list.
Yeah,
Where are we in offshore wind? Where were we January 19th? What's broken since then?
It's really unfortunate because we came into this year with a ton of momentum in the offshore wind industry. We had 11 projects worth about 19 gigawatts of power that had been fully permitted by the federal government. States had awarded offtake or financial agreements to move forward to about 15 gigawatts of projects. They were also reorganizing how they were going to do it, and we had seen, based off that, $10 billion worth of supply chain investments into the offshore wind industry in just 2024. And that was, despite the fact that everyone knew that Trump could, 50-50 shot Trump was going to win the election, people were still putting down funding for this long-term industry that they saw for the opportunity. Since then, we've just entered this state of, I'm going to call it negative limbo, where first day in office, President issued an executive memorandum which functionally stopped the permitting process. And for the offshore wind industry, it takes 10 years to permit anything. Supply chain investments need that longevity of a pipeline of certainty. Stopping all that has just broken the market confidence in the offshore wind industry, and they've piled on. So 2 months ago, they pulled a permit from Atlantic Shores over in New Jersey. They claimed it was not a final permit, but it functionally was a final permit, EPA permit. And then a couple weeks ago, they issued a stop order on the Empire Wind Project. And, we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but, that was a fully permitted project. They've given no explanation to it whatsoever. So even though that we have these permitted projects, they have question marks about how they're going to move forward or whether they're going to move forward. And, it's not, I'm going to have a dose of optimism here because at the same time, our states are still underpinning the long-term foundation of our market. State of New York has not backed away at all. In fact, they've actually stepped up and sued the Trump administration to reverse this order. Yeah. But it's the funniness of this administration's actions that on the same day that they issued an executive memorandum to really slow down the offshore wind industry, they also declared an energy emergency. That energy emergency is not going away. New York still needs that power. Massachusetts still needs that power. New Jersey still needs that power. And it's limbo because this short-term period is full of huge question marks, but the long-term trajectory of our industry hasn't really changed, which is it's going to be enormous because we just need the power. And it's very hard to build a lot of power in New York City itself, so the best place to do it is right offshore.
So, Jainey and Walter, we talked in the prep call about how the Biden administration used funding as a policy mechanism. And the administration just put incredible sums of money into climate priorities that really moved the needle on climate mitigation and adaptation and resilience. And we're seeing the same happen in reverse now with major priorities like the National Climate Assessment still existing on paper, but with $0 actually assigned to it. What happens in these scenarios?
So I want to talk about funding, and then I want to go back to the National Climate Assessment, which to me is about data. So I think this administration is erasing policy by pulling funding, right? We saw it with the termination of a $4 million NOAA grant to Princeton, which supported cutting-edge climate modeling. This is information that helps us predict severe weather, right? It is the foundation to NOAA's hurricane outlooks every year. It is information that guides infrastructure planning. It's the information we need to sit at the table in global climate negotiations. They also shut down FEMA's BRIC program, which I know, many of you are well aware of because this included grants in New York City and New York State. And these are grants that support the strengthening of schools, of hospitals, of roads to become more climate resilient, to be better prepared for extreme weather. So without this support, we're leaving areas vulnerable. We are sort of flying blind without the science that we need to know what to prepare for. But the administration has also, Joseph, as you mentioned, targeted data. And the National Climate Assessment was canceled. There are NOAA programs that collect, analyze, and deliver information in a way that industry and communities can use that are being targeted right now. Most recently, many of you may have seen that the administration actually canceled NOAA's billion-dollar disaster database, which seems incredibly politically convenient at the moment because now we will never know the true costs of natural disasters during the Trump administration. But it is also the tool that tracks the rising costs of natural disasters. Without this, we can't understand trends. We can't understand risks. We can't make smart decisions about what's coming and how we need to prepare. I think, in the press release about the cancellation of the grant to Princeton, it basically said, there's too much climate anxiety right now, so we are going to stop funding climate data. Undermining the data does not make the danger go away. It just means that we will not understand it and we will not be able to prepare for it.
Yeah, you mentioned policy by funding. So during the Obama administration, frustrated by the Congress's unwillingness to do anything on climate change, Obama tried to do it through regulatory action. That was largely undone in Trump 1. So when the Biden administration came in, they decided, let's not try to, we'll do some regulatory work as well, but let's really focus on funding as a way of carrying out policy. And there were $2 trillion laws that were actually passed: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021, called Bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, called IRA, or IRA. So Bill was mostly about infrastructure, a huge number of water projects in that package. So far, those haven't been attacked too frontally by the administration. But IRA was a lot of money for climate-related things, for improving renewable energy and so forth. And that has been a major target of the Trump administration. So just to reiterate, excuse me, where the Bill money went, there was $50 billion, billion with a B, for water infrastructure, $12.5 billion for clean water SRFs, $30.8 for the drinking water SRFs. That included $15 billion for lead pipe replacement throughout the United States, with the real goal of trying to get rid of all lead pipes within a decade or so. $4 billion for emerging contaminants, we're talking PFAS there, as well as some other things. $5 billion for WIN grants, that's water infrastructure improvements for the nation. Those were targeted for small, underserved, disadvantaged communities. Subtext EJ, that's obviously a target that the administration currently wouldn't approve. And a couple of billion, almost a couple of billion for geographic programs like the Great Lakes, closer to home, Long Island Sound, things of that sort. All of this funding was supposed to be focused to a large extent on EJ communities. There's various phrases that define those, but it's basically the communities that we all know as environmental justice communities. 49% of the drinking water SRF, and it was supposed to go to those kind of communities, and likewise the clean water SRF. So it's not clear how the current Trump administration will try to change those formulas. They were built into the IRA law, so you'd have to get Congress to change that, and we'll see what Congress does about that. Another important element for water programs is that in 2021, after a hiatus of 10 or 11 years, Congress reinstituted the practice of earmarks. This is where individual members of Congress can stick into the budget for each year specific funding for specific projects in their communities or their states. A huge amount of those earmark projects were specific to water program projects, clean water sewage infrastructure and drinking water infrastructure. A lot of that money comes through EPA, or all of that money comes through EPA and then goes out to the grantees. EPA is severely backlogged already in processing those grants because we weren't staffed. I still say we, even though I've been gone from EPA for a year and a half, so forgive me. EPA wasn't staffed up ahead of time and has had difficulty staffing up since then because so many people with my color hair have been leaving the agency in recent years. So there's a huge backlog there. That backlog will only get worse now with the budget cuts. That was the goal of the Biden administration, was to do policy through funding. The Trump administration, certainly for the IRA, for the climate-related and EJ-related work, the Trump administration is explicitly opposed to that. But a lot of the funding was going to go to red states and red communities in blue states. And so there is at least a significant fraction of Republican congressmen who are supportive of, for example, renewable energy funding. We'll see whether some of them are able to change the direction on offshore wind. Because again, there's a lot of money in that, as you characterized, huge amount of construction jobs and the whole supply chain. And a lot of that money was going to be going to Republican districts, including, I might add, to the district of former Congressman Lee Zeldin. So we'll see what happens in Congress. It's going to be an interesting couple of months or years.
So,
No, go ahead.
I want to start to think about, we're talking about the individual cuts now, but we're actually, in addition to those individual cuts, which are all bad, 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 there's a much longer term kind of precedent that we're setting from a legal perspective, and then also, kind of in a different way from a privatization perspective for NOAA and National Weather Service. I wonder if you can talk about those a little bit. Maybe start with you, Sam, because you also are doing a lot of work kind of building off of what Walter just said about bringing some of these arguments to red states and all the supply chain and offshore wind. But I want to start to dig into this legal precedent piece.
Yeah, I'll have two thoughts. So number one, the Empire Stop Order was really a crossing of a Rubicon, where it was a fully permitted project in the middle of installation. South Brooklyn Marine Terminal is, under heavy construction right now. Onshore work was done. A lot of offshore work had just commenced, and for the federal government to go in and yank their own permission to build with really no justification, they have given no proof. Their only thing that they really said was that this was a rush process that took 12 years from start to begin. And, you could hear, immediately you saw an outcry from the industry, which is, this is really targeting offshore wind because it's one person's vendetta against our industry. But this is a really chilling fact that if you want to do long-term business in the United States that requires a significant amount of federal permitting, this is a real cautionary tale that's going to happen. If your industry, for whatever reason, goes out of favor with whatever administration, they could just do this to you. And that they know it's a bad idea too. So the Deputy Secretary of Energy was before a confirmation hearing just a few days ago. They asked her about it. She said, yeah, it's bad precedent. A Trump nominee was essentially saying it's bad precedent. And then Secretary Burgum, almost the same day that he announced the stop order, was before an oil and gas conference. And he essentially said that he was going to propose that they would write a regulation where traditional carbon companies, if their projects are stopped midstream, they would be reimbursed for all costs associated with it. So on their end, they know it's a horrible idea too, To sort of the advocacy work, offshore wind is, we are under construction, and we have 3 commercial scale projects under construction, but it's a ton of education about the fact that we exist, the fact that we're big, that we're employing a lot of people. And we spent the first part of these 6 months having our suppliers walk us into offices in Ohio and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and essentially say, we're shipbuilding, we're steelmaking, we're manufacturing, and it's all tied to the East Coast. But it is a ton of money that is going into these districts very far away, paid for by New York ratepayers, paid for by Massachusetts ratepayers. So we've been working those tools and seeing what the reaction is. I think the reality is that there's a president who is very popular within his own party, and even Republican congressmen have to, even if they like offshore wind, they sort of have to figure out how to work through this process right now. So I think it's going to take time for us to unlock, and it's unfortunate because everything's moving so fast. We don't quite have time, but that's what the Oceanic Network has been focused on right now.
So I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer by training. If this was a legal conference, which fortunately it's not, we would spend the next 2 or 3 hours discussing that cancellation of that existing permit, outrageous, and we'll see how the lawsuit goes on that. So what are the precedent-setting things that are sort of most concerning to me? Obviously, you have you've got the firing of all the young people, the probationary employees throughout the federal government. This is the next generation of federal career civil servants, losing institutional memory as they encourage more senior people to leave the agency. Disastrous effects on morale throughout the entire federal government, not just NOAA, not just EPA, but through everywhere else. But I think arguably the biggest threat to the professionalism of the federal government civil service is something that used to be called Schedule F. It's now called Schedule Policy Career. It was announced on the 18th of April by OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, new regulations that would reclassify federal career civil service employees into this new schedule, a designation that would strip them of key civil service protections. Specifically, they could be removed, fired at will by the president or the political appointee. The rule purports that, only about 50,000 out of the 2.2 million federal employees, civil service career professional employees, would be affected. 500,000 or more is probably more accurate. It is so sweeping, it is so overbroad. Comments are due by next Friday. I'm working with a national organization called the Environmental Protection Network. We're in the process of finalizing our 23-page comment letter. So it's just a disastrous thing because it completely deprofessionalizes a professional civil service, something that we've spent the last 100 years building. There's virtually no evidence for why this is being done. The executive order that spurred this says, well, we want to separate employees who cannot or will not meet required performance standards, and it's particularly important with regard to employees in confidential, policy-determining, policy-making, or policy-advocating positions. Those are the 3 terms of art in the law that specify what are political appointees and what are career professional appointees or employees. And they would simply sweep an enormous number of people all the way down to the staff level, in some instances, into this political category. So I think that is actually the most dangerous and the worst precedent-setting element as far as the civil service and as far as running the government in a professional, competent way. I think that's the worst.
Let me speak quickly to privatization. So maybe just as a bit of education, no matter what app or source you use to get your weather forecast in the morning, the foundational data for that forecast is most likely coming from the National Weather Service. Project 2025 makes very clear the administration's intent to privatize the National Weather Service. So this means that at a basic level, your storm warning is going to be behind a paywall. But I think there are other consequences to this too. First, we're probably going to start experiencing uneven coverage. Rural or underserved areas are less likely to get accurate weather forecasts than dense urban areas like New York City, because there are probably going to be more subscribers to the weather service, whatever that is. We could end up where in a place where we're actually stifling innovation, right? The National Weather Service's open source data actually seeds a whole bunch of innovation in terms of how to package and communicate weather products in a way that people can use them. If that information is privatized, all of a sudden innovators don't have access to that base data in the way that they used to. But I think the worst consequence in my mind is that weather could be subject to disinformation in the same way that some of us probably tune into MSNBC and others tune into Fox News because that's how we hear what we want from those different outlets. You might start seeing weather being subject to political and commercial interests in the same way.
All right, so we've got about 1 minute left. I'd love to hear in 1 to 2 sentences each, what do you need advocates like Sam and I to do, or state and local governments, of which there's many in the room, what do you need us to be doing and focusing on now? We'll just go right in order.
I'm going to say 2 things. One, call your member of Congress every single day and ask them to save these agencies, right? They count the number of calls that they get about any particular issue at the end of the day. If you have friends and family living in red districts and red states, make sure they're calling and they are spreading the word. We have to save these essential government services. And to Sam's point earlier, like we need our members of Congress to find their backbone and stand up for these essential services. The second thing, I'm sorry, I know that we're running out of time. I do think that there are some opportunities presented by some of the gaps that we're seeing now. We have needed to move adaptation funding from a grant dependent approach to one where we can actually attract investment. Let's experiment. Let's lean into the opportunities for innovation. Let's capture those learnings. Let's bear witness to the things that we can't fund through investment so that we can advocate for the reinstatement of these programs later. But let's keep doing the work so we can move the field.
Yeah, I agree with the political issues. We also need the states and even municipalities like big cities like New York to step up, and they are in our area, New York, New Jersey, very aggressive, a lot of the northeastern states and some of the West Coast states. Other states have to do the same. We need the private sector to step up. We know that solar energy and renewables generally are poised to become worldwide very, very cost effective, very competitive. We need to try and maintain that through private investment here in the United States, even during this hostile political climate. We need the insurance industry, which is very, very concerned about climate change, to actually step up its lobbying efforts. They are increasing premiums because they can't afford to pay out all the claims, but they aren't doing the lobbying work that really is essential on the political side.
I think for offshore wind, and New York and New York City have done this, so I'm no criticism here whatsoever, but they just need to keep up the demand signal. So they need to keep on saying every single day, we want this industry, we want it to power our homes, we want it to create good jobs, we want it to revitalize our waterfronts, but having them every single day continue saying, we're not going away, we want this industry and we want it here as soon as possible, is the strongest signal that they can continue sending, not only to federal decision makers, but to the administration itself too. Yeah.
All right, Jainey, Walter, Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll invite Matthew Washington to the stage.
Thank you, Joseph. I got invited to the stage and nobody clapped for me. I mean, that's much better. Thank you. And thanks to the panelists for quite a pep talk in the morning. So we're fired up, and I have a couple things to say. And then the next pep topic we're going to talk about is the transatlantic slave trade. So I'm not kidding, but it's going to get good. So I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Matthew Washington. I'm proud to be a board member of Waterfront Alliance. And when I take my cape off, I work for Phipps Houses, which is building affordable housing here in New York City. So thrilled to be here. Thank you. You know, one of the things that I love about this conference every year is that we bring in lots of people, and I've had the fortunate pleasure of coming here many years. I was chatting with my friend Therese in the front earlier, and she said, "My name is Therese, I've been here for a long time." And she said, "You've been here for a long time." So Therese met me when I had hair, and you can see what happened there. But one of the things that I love about this conference is the opportunity to network and connect with one another, to build relationships, because no matter what the challenge, if we face it together, we can accomplish incredible things. So with that in mind, I want to let everyone know, if you have not yet done so, there is an app that you can download. In the program, there is some information about it. You can download it. You'll enter code Waterfront Conference 25. You'll have the full program, full access to everything. There's some information up here. Full access to everything in the app, so you don't have to carry the paper. You can just utilize your phone. It gives you an opportunity to connect with other participants in the conference, and you also can just see what's going on, find out what you're doing, and you can win prizes, which I really want to talk with you all about. So there is a game appropriately called networking game. So the goal is to engage with others in the conference and earn points. I don't know if the leaderboard is up there, but I was top of the leaderboard. But then I got a text message that told me I can't win, so my heart is broken. Oh, that's an old leaderboard. I'm on the top. I have a gold prize right now. But there are a lot of fun questions that you can answer talking about the work that we're doing. But we want you to engage. You'll get to meet people on the back of some lanyards. I think for the scholars, they have a code. Go talk to them, get to know them, and get their code so you can get some points. At the closing plenary, the winners will be announced, but you must be here to win. So you can't already be on your boat off to the Rockaways. You have to be here to win, so please stay. And we have some really great prizes. I'll tell you a little bit about them. Some cruises of Jamaica Bay and New York Harbor, a gift certificate to McNally Jackson Booksellers, and many, many more. So to help you all get started, if you're in the app or on the page, there is a challenge called Matthew's Challenge, and you have to enter a code to get the 5 points. I am competitive, so I don't want to tell you what the right code is, but I am obligated to. So if you enter WIN, W-I-N, and hit enter, you will get 5 points on your journey to overtaking me on the list. So please go to the expo. You'll get to meet some participants who are tabling, get some information from them, but get to meet people, exchange business cards, connect, find times where we can continue to build this Waterfront Alliance and work in collaboration to do great things and fight for the funding that's been cut. So we're going to keep moving that forward. And as I said, we are going to talk about a really great project called Middle Passage and Port Markers. So this is actually an incredible project. I'm going to ask the panelists and our moderator to come up on stage. So they're over there. As they come up, I will let the moderator introduce them as they're walking up. Please give them a round of applause as they're coming up. This is a really great project. As many of you know, the transatlantic slave trade, it is estimated over 2 million African people died during that. Over 500,000 survived and came. And so the effort that we're going to hear a little bit about today is remembering that history and how we do that in New York and New Jersey's harbor and waterfronts. And so really is a phenomenal project, a great effort from many who have done this for a number of years. And it truly is a celebratory moment for the work that they've done. So I want to introduce the moderator who will introduce the panelists, but I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Captain Jonathan Boulware, who is the president and CEO of the South Street Seaport Museum. And Jonathan is a great friend, a confidant. I've cried on his shoulder a lot, so thank you for your shoulder. But really just a gem of a human and somebody who I cherish dearly. And so thank you for agreeing to moderate this panel for us today, Jonathan. And thank you to the panelists for being a part of this great effort to remember history. And I'm being kicked off the stage. So thank you all very much and enjoy the conference.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Delighted to be with you today. I'm going to introduce these panelists, and I'm going to say a few words before I let them speak. But we're going to talk about some work that is important, some work that is, in the contemporary moment, bizarrely polarizing, and in this particular town, highly relevant in this country and in this time. Joining me today are Ms. Ann Chin, who is the founder of the Port Markers, Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project, which identified in the first instance a lack of markers or memorials to the Middle Passage specifically, that being the Atlantic transit of enslaved people. And following, I think, on the premise of Toni Morrison's Bench by the Road, the idea that there ought to be a place to reflect. Also joining us, Dr. John Harris, the author of The Last Slave Ships, which is a book I read a couple of years ago, I think, when it came out, and I'll talk about this in just a second, but a book about the trafficking of humans after the illegality, after the making illegal of the Atlantic slave trade, highly relevant piece of investigative history, and then New York's own Pamela Pettyjohn, who, in addition to being a board member of the Waterfront Alliance, is the chair of the steering committee of the Port Markers Project, or Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project of New York and New Jersey, which is the local effort to place a marker in New York City. Today, there still is not one, which is what we're working on. Before I turn this over to Ms. Chin, I want to just say, relevant to this, and I'm very honored to be able to be part of this effort, but also honored to have been asked to moderate this, and it gives me the opportunity to make a couple of key points about New York City. This is an audience that will understand this much more readily, I think, than many, but New York is a maritime city. One of my other favorite books recently is Ross Perlin's Language City, which, in addition to identifying communities of language that exist here but don't exist where they came from, dying languages for whom the last surviving speakers are here in New York City. But the favorite fact that came out of that book is that there are nearly 800 languages and dialects spoken in New York City today. That is more languages that have been spoken in any city in the world ever. That's a maritime story. This is a maritime city. That kind of diversity, peak diversity, a panoply of people in a city like this that is represented nowhere else in the world, not even close, is an example of a city that has been globally connected via the water over centuries. And there are many, many stories that underlie that. And of course, what we're going to talk about a little bit today is one of the shameful ones. Right? In our museum, we're elevating, and we have a contemporary show, which I'd love you to see, called Maritime City, that leans very much into this topic. But we're talking about the ways in which New York arose from the sea, practically, financially, metaphorically, romantically, from an immigration standpoint. And I contend that every story that we tell in New York City can be traced back to that watery connection to the rest of the world. And it gives us, therefore, an opportunity to illuminate the city itself and its people. And that's the work that we've been doing. So I think, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Ann Chin, who will talk with you more about the Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project and its conception.
Thank you, Jonathan. The Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project began in 2011. We're based in Jacksonville, Florida, but we do the research that identifies the exact locations where Africans arrived after completing the Middle Passage. And we specifically address directly from Africa to the mainland or to the US territories. When we started this project, we thought it was important that it be community-based, that it be truth-telling, and we had to sell the idea even that this history is important. In the US, there is a hesitancy, I believe, to be interested in history, to understand that it puts the present in context. And this particular phase, we don't say slave trade, we say human trade, because if you say slave, it sort of sets the stage for almost a dismissal of the fact that we're talking about human beings. New York, New Jersey harbor has, as you see, a history that extends from 1655 to 1863, basically, transporting Africans to this harbor. John will take it from 1830s on up, specifically in the involvement, and of course, Pamela will do today. I want you to consider that the 500,000 people over a period of 350 years coming to this mainland, not just New York, not a single one came by choice. I think most people who arrived to these shores, who are European descent, or sometimes even Asian descent, came for refuge, opportunity, family connections. Every single one of the Africans involved in the transatlantic trade did not choose this. Some lost their freedom before they were transported, and some then were captive.
I think you can use that to advance your
Yes.
slides.
So this is our sort of our logo is the ocean, because it is a maritime history.
Maybe the top button, the big one. The green one, big green one, maybe.
Okay.
There you go.
So there's just some facts here for you. I think pictures always are astounding. When the transatlantic trade started for this North American mainland, it was mainly men, young men who were brought. They were raw labor. Towards the end of the trade, the 1840s, 50s, 60s, the emphasis was more on children. And the shipments got larger. What may have been a ship that could carry 150 people, 50 to 100 was standard, 120. By the end of this trade, there were ships, the business of human trade. Some ships had 900 people. They were naked. They were put in the bottom of the ship. They were chained to each other. Sometimes the voyages went for 3 or 4 months as ships went down the coast of Africa. And we're talking West Africa and East Africa and South Africa. So what you have is a mixture. You have what New York has now. People from ethnicities and different cultures. And all of them, again, did not choose to come here. From the beginning of the trade until 1830s, and I think I want to have you think about this in terms of what is American, or who is American. Until the 1830s, into the Americas, and now we're talking 10 million people, 3/4 of those who arrived on those shores were Africans. Until the 1830s, in the European settlements, the majority of the children born were of African descent because their mothers were African. The children. So I'm saying to everyone, if your family's been here for 200 years or more, you're either descended from or related to Africans. I think the most startling revelation this week was that our new Pope is of African descent. These are the realities. This is our history. This is American history. People were brought here from Africa because of their skills and knowledge. If you were in the South, it may have been rice. It may have been sugar. But it was also in the North. Everybody thinks that the history of slavery in this country is Southern. It is American. We have identified locations from Maine to Texas. And of course, we have the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. On our website, we have an interactive map. And what our project is doing, in addition to encouraging locations like New York and New Jersey Harbor to hold remembrance ceremonies, because we, as many of us descendant of Africans, don't know exactly where our ancestors came from. I mean, I can have a sense now because of the DNA studies. But we've walked away in many ways from our connection to Africa because of racism, prejudice, guilt, shame, just avoidance of a very uncomfortable, messy, and horrible history. But this country's built on the labor and the skills and the knowledge of these people, my ancestors. One of the things that we also do is to connect with Africa, because the trade is dependent upon people who would supply captives to be transported. In Senegal, this particular monument in Dakar addresses the fact that the three people here face the West. They are Africans facing the Americas, and they're holding their child. We're encouraging places in Africa to explore and to connect with us in Benin, Ghana, places in the Congo. Talk about a contradiction in this country. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Didn't apply to us. Didn't apply to a lot of other people. Didn't apply to women. It didn't apply to poor people. And the vanguard for broadening the application and even including equality comes from the descendants of Africans primarily. We connect to the legacy of slavery. Sometimes people resist it. They see it as accusatory. We consider the fact that if we acknowledge this history, it's truth-telling. These are some examples of the ceremonies we've had. Our first ceremony was in Yorktown, Virginia. Second one was in Jamestown, Virginia, and then Point Comfort. It's been ongoing, but this history began in 1526 with the Spanish. We also have, I guess, handicapped in the sense that the history is pretty much identified as British related to this country. But it's the Spanish, the French, and the British. We believe in markers ought to be publicly accessible. Whether it's part of the curriculum or not is a challenge. And we're going to continue putting up these markers with the community, holding remembrance ceremonies. And I have to say that it was the Waterfront Alliance that introduced us, our project, to Pam and the Middle Passage Committee that is now established. And I guess I don't want to take up too much time. So go ahead.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Chin. I'll turn it over now to Dr. Harris, but I just want to say that and I think I may have mentioned this to you, but I was in Florida, the Panhandle, hadn't been there before, but I drove from Pensacola to Biloxi and then Mobile and was able to visit 3 of these markers in succession, which I just have to say as a sort of trail of breadcrumbs led to a very visceral drive across I-10 with little detours along the way. And so I think there's a way in which you've changed the way that people can travel through some of these relevant places. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Harris?
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. In 1808, Congress banned the transatlantic slave trade. From that moment onwards, 1808, fairly early in this new nation's history, Congress banned the traffic. So the United States was to have no connection to the transatlantic slave trade from that moment on. In fact, there were some serious penalties for doing so, including execution. And yet, the slave trade continued for a further half-century, all the way up to and including into the American Civil War. And as Anne has pointed out, this is slavery national, right? Especially in the 19th century, we think of the slave trade as, or we think of slavery as a Southern problem, a Southern institution. But no city more than New York City was involved in this illegal trafficking of human beings. And this watercolor painting is from 1860, and it was right there that this is America's last slave trading port, New York City, right where we're sitting right now. Let's take a closer look. Here is an image from my book. It's Lower Manhattan turned on its side. But these are the key slave trading merchants and places that were involved. You can walk these streets and you can see these places. You know, the buildings, most of them are not still there, but this is where it was taking place, and you can walk it for yourselves. On the right, we have José Maia Ferreira. He was one of the key slave trading merchants. He was an immigrant from the Portuguese colony of Angola. He is working in conjunction with Cunha Reis. In the bottom left, you can see Maia Ferreira, Cunha Reis, and Figanier. They are working together in this illegal slave trading firm. So many of these individuals are immigrants, and they're working in conjunction with native-born Americans, American ship captains, and so forth, and stevedores, custom house officials. The police are being bribed, the federal law enforcement. They're actually coming on slave ships as they leave New York Harbor, and they're given gold, and they take it, their palms are greased, and they let the ship go out to port. What these enslavers are doing is they're buying up slave ships. They buy up hundreds of slave ships in the 1850s and 1860s, and they outfit them and they clear them for the African coast or really any port they want. And they're pretending that these are legal voyages, but they're not. And really, if law enforcement took a closer look, they can tell that they're not. They're full of planks to make an extra deck for enslaved people to lie upon and so on. So there's a lot of bribe. It's a story of capital run amok. It's corruption of law enforcement. It's a hustle. It's in many ways, it's conducted by immigrants as well as people who are here. And obviously it's a story of white supremacy as well. So it's all, there's a lot mixed in here in this New York story. This is not unknown at the time. In my book, I write about an informant, a spy for the British government called Emilio Sanchez. And he is too scared to tell the world about what's going on because the slave traders would cut his throat. And they did kill informants. So he wrote to the local newspaper, I think this is the New York Herald, under the pseudonym South Street, where many of the slave ships were leaving. And he listed here in 1860, the first 7 months alone, he's listing 85 slave ships that have left US ports, predominantly New York City for the African coast. As Anne said, these are large vessels. In some cases in this period, they're carrying up to 1,300 enslaved people, and they are mostly children. Where are these ships going? They're leaving New York Harbor. They're following the ocean currents and wind patterns, arcing across the North Atlantic, and they're heading down towards West Central Africa, modern-day Angola and Congo. Some are going to East Africa as well. Captives are forced aboard. Over 200,000. This is not a small story. We're talking about up to 300 ships, over 200,000 enslaved people are forced aboard these vessels in the 1850s, 1860s, and most of these ships are coming from New York City. They are enduring the Middle Passage, horrific conditions, high mortality, to say nothing of the psychological impacts and so forth. Most of the captives are sent to the Spanish island of Cuba, and I think actually this is important for how this history has been forgotten, because the enslaved people generally do not arrive in the United States. If you want to find descendants of victims of this traffic that New York perpetrated in conjunction with the African coast and with Cuba, you're going to have to go to Cuba to find them. An image here of one of the New York slave ships, the Nightingale, 1860, left right here, the East River. Another slave ship on the right is the Isla de Cuba, also left Manhattan in 1858, actually did several voyages. This is a kind of, look, if you're looking down, a bird's eye view on the ship. There's extra planking and barrels carrying food and water and coppers for boiling the food and so on. This is what's leaving New York City, right? But if you take a close look, it's very obvious what's going on. The bottom left is a sketch of some captives who had been intercepted by a British vessel on the African coast. It's intercepting captives from a New York ship, and the sketch is highlighting the emaciated conditions and so on. It's very hard to see, but there are initials CR on the bodies of two of the captives. This is Cunha Reis, the Brazilian slave trader I mentioned earlier. This is the literal imprint of New York capital on the flesh of enslaved captives, okay, on the African coast. So just to wrap up quickly here, this illegal traffic did come to an end during the Civil War, and it was a new administration. We've been talking about administrations a lot. Well, this was the Republican Party in its 1860s iteration, when it was trying to, end the ultimately ended slavery in the United States, but also ended the transatlantic slave trade. This is an important legacy of Abraham Lincoln, even though this history is not very well known. In 1862, finally, one of these slave traders, a New Yorker called Nathaniel Gordon, he was a ship captain, he was captured, and he was executed. And like a thunderclap, the New York Tribune said, the slave traders quit. Serious regulation, serious action, and the slave traders either fled the country again or they seeped back into normal society. And it was the close of the slave trade from the United States, and it closed right here in New York City. I better pass it on because we're getting close to running out of time.
I don't have any slides,
okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Oh, good, we're all here. You've heard from my colleagues here about the actual Middle Passage, the Mid-Atlantic Passage, and 2 million enslaved people died on their way here. But I wanted to talk just a little bit more about the people that did survive and did come to this country. This is a great and wealthy country, but we got here by the backs of enslaved people. We're known for our sugar, tobacco, coffee, even chocolate. I just learned that, chocolate. But of course, we were the world leaders as far as cotton. And we were able to be these leaders and have this economic engine because of enslaved people. I've noticed now a lot of monuments are being taken down, a lot of history is being erased, and we're trying to prevent all of this. This is, it may be something that we're not really proud of, but it's part of American history. And the enslaved people contribute a lot to this country, including the infrastructure. The White House was built by slaves. One of the most copied buildings is the Capitol. If you go to other countries, you'll see a replica of our Capitol in other countries. I've seen it in France, I've seen it in Cuba, and I really don't know how many other countries, but that's the most recognizable building. And this is not, we're not talking about architects that were telling the enslaved people. This was from conception to the end of all this building was all done by enslaved people. Here in New York, Francis Tavern, and Broadway and Wall Street. And for those Harvard graduates in the room, Harvard was also built by enslaved people. I just wanted to say, as a point that Jonathan had made, Pier 17 is one of the disembarkment points in New York where enslaved people first touched land in chains. We now know that as the South Street Seaport, and that is one of the locations that we are trying to get that first marker. If you look at New York waterfront, you look at the history, you can look at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Weeksville. New York and New Jersey is rich with this history. We're just saying that it all should not disappear. There were wonderful contributions, things that are still standing today that we can see. We shouldn't erase the fact that enslaved people were brought here and they contribute to the economic engine of this country and also built a lot of the infrastructure that we see now today. So I'm going to wrap this up a little bit by saying now we have eloquently introduced you to the Middle Passage Port Markers Project, and I take the opportunity to appeal for you to consider joining our local chapter of the New York, New Jersey Middle Passage Port Markers Project. Long name, isn't it? During the past several years, groups have been meeting while attempting to solidify the New York, New Jersey Middle Passage Port Markers Project. Among the initial founders is the Waterfront Alliance. Thank you. The South Street Seaport, Jonathan, thank you so much for all of your support, and Coney Island Beautification Project, and several other illustrious groups. We have identified many appropriate locations to denote as tributes to major human trade sites and the impact of the enslaved people. History will be documented for antiquity as these monumental places. Our stories will be researched and factually written for future generations to acknowledge. Human slave trade can be pinpointed from the shores of Africa. What a mighty story to be told. How contribution of endless supply of free labor built a mighty nation. Port to port, thousands of forced laborers landed upon our shores. Sorry. To build the United States of America. The true story must be told. Will you help keep in joining the work of the New York, New Jersey Middle Passage Project? Thank you.
As you can see, the work that we've undertaken is potent, it is relevant, it is timely, and I think the call to action is to join if you'd like. I think too, as we think about this particular moment in the national climate, this is not a city that backs down, and frankly, given where we are and the diversity that I opened in discussing, I would say that the work that we have contemplated here is imperative. Yeah, I think I'll end there, and we do have a very brief bit of time if there are questions.